Good morning, friends. I am Dr. Shubhangi Lenve. Today we are going to learn Mending Wall, the poem, the next part of it. In the previous part, we learned about rhyming scheme, how it is written in iambic pentameter, how it is written in a blank verse, and now we are going to learn what is the context and theme of this poem. Mending Wall. See, it is about the speaker. Who is the speaker of Mending Wall? The speaker of Mending Wall is a person, likely a man, though to be clear, this is not ever stated in the poem, who lives in rural New England on a farm with an apple orchard. The speaker's farm seems to be relatively remote. The speaker mentions having only one neighbor, and their properties are separately by a stone wall that must be repaired every spring. Since the poet Robert Frost was living on a farm in rural New Hampshire at the time the poem was written, some people have taken the speaker to be Frost himself or a version of Frost. Certainly, the speaker seems, like Frost, to have a strong education in classical mythology and an awareness of the history of English poetry. See, here we can understand here is a farmer who is the speaker of the poem who talked about the mending wall, which is mending every year due to the spring, due to the frost, and due to the hunters who come for the hunting in the fields of the farmers in New England. And it is a tradition to build a mending wall again in New England. So it also reflects the tradition of the farmers after the spring season. Although the speaker uses plain everyday language throughout, the speaker is clearly capable of making allusions to classical myth like the myth of Sisyphus and using blank verse, one of the most distinguished literary forms in the history of English poetry. This suggests, the poem does not confirm this suggestion, that the speaker is an interpolar, a newcomer to the rural community where the poem takes place. By contrast, the neighbor seems to have lived there for generations. The poem is thus infused with implicit tension between urban and rural, the educated elite and the plain spoken farmer. In this tense exchange, the speaker is not altogether a sympathetic character. Some readers may find the speaker verbose and condescending, his arguments too border on the naively utopian. By contrast, the neighbor speaks from a position of cynicism and practicality about human society. Readers will have to decide for themselves which of the two they trust and agree with. This is about the setting of the Mending Wall. Mending Wall is set in rural New England. It was even first published in a book called North of Boston. Its two characters, the speaker and the neighbor, likely live in an agriculture community, though whether either is a farmer remains unclear. The reader does know for certain that neither raises cattle. Here there are no cows, the speaker announces. The poem takes place in early spring after the writer Frost have damaged the wall between their properties. The speaker describes the frost in detail, the frozen ground swell as a mysterious force that damages and defeats human labor. For instance, the frost work in secret. No one has seen them made or heard them made. It means no one has seen them made or heard them made. The natural world that the poem describes seems hostile and powerful, a force that human beings have to counteract through diligent and difficult work. Here, this setting suggests what is the work of farmer in that farm after spring season, how the mending wall should be repaired every year to the farmers. The setting of the poem is reflected in its unpretentious language. The poet has worked hard to capture the sounds of a rural place where flowery, ornate, rhetorical habits are unnecessary and unwelcome, and it is reflected in the neighbor's insistence. Plain spoke wisdom, good fences make good neighbors. See how it suggests how the good fences, good neighbors used the words to reflect neighbors' insistent, plain spoken wisdom. As the speaker suggests, this idea of the neighbors has actually been handed down from generation to generation without the intervention of sophisticated urban elites and their perhaps more modern ideas. The praise is his father's saying. What is the literary context of Mending Wall? Literary and historical context. Robert Frost works wrote Mending Wall in 1914 at the height of literary modernism. Modernism is the broad and complicated literary movement. It responds to the rapid industrialization and urbanization of the late 19th and early 20th centuries by emphasizing the isolation that many peoples felt in a newly modern world, and if does so by breaking from traditional literary forms. Modernist writers often write without meter, rhyme, and set form. Instead, they invent new forms. They bring together fragments and quotations, and about all, they speak. They seek to cultivate the same innovation and excitement in literature that they see in the world around them. Frost's relationship with modernism has been a subject of vigorous debate among soul scholars for many years. Frost's early critics dismissed him as out of touch, even anti-modernist. Mending Wall, for instance, is set far from the bustling cities of early 20th century America. It uses a traditional form, blank verse, indeed one of the most prestigious traditional forms. So here we can understand how the modern world is the background to this particular poem, Mending Wall, and how it is used the blank verse form, which is very famous and particularly used for the poetry writing in the modernism, and it is again the situation in the 20th century. Industrialization and urbanization. The effect of industrialization and urbanization is also shown in the poem by Robert Frost. But more recent critics have defended Frost and argued for counting him among the modernists. Though he is far from the most radical of the modernist poets, he nonetheless makes significant and subtle innovations in the forms he uses. These innovations are evident in Mending Wall. In his pervasive metrical substitutions, which test the limits of blank verse, and in the irony that suffuses the poem. The poem does not resolve its debate for its readers, nor does it present a particular trustworthy or admirable speaker. The old certainties have fallen away. Thus, while Mending Wall may be distant from the pulsing heart of modernity, all the uncertainty and disorientation modernism involves are clearly evident in the poem. See, what is the historical context of the poem? Mending Wall was written in the early 1910s in a transitional period in American life. Following a century of mass immigration and industrialization, the United States has become a substantially more diverse and populous place than it had been at its founding, and the substantially more urban place as well. The gentlemen farmers who founded American democracy had been supplanted by fractious urban political parties alongside populist rural political movements. Further, the country had expanded from the Atlantic coasting, coasting Atlantic coastline all the way to the Pacific. In recent memory, the frontier had been officially declared closed in 1890s. So, here we can understand what is the historical context of the particular poem Mending Wall, how it is the farmer who founded American democracy had been supplanted by fractious urban political parties alongside populist rural political movements. So, as these rapid changes took place, a set of tensions developed in the country between urban and rural populations, between the educated elite and wild swaths of or undereducated people, between New England Protestants who could trace their ancestors to the earlier pilgrims and more recent Catholic and Jewish arrivals. Though Mending Wall does not specifically acknowledge this context, it is implicit throughout the poem. For instance, one might read the debate between the speaker and his neighbor as an expression of conflict between an urban and rural populations, and perhaps between an old New England stock and a newer crop of immigrants laying claim to the country, trying to shape it line with their ideals. Here we can understand how the particular poem has a historical and literary context, and in this poem we can understand how the particular Mending Wall played a vital role in the modernist period, and it reflects modernist period, the life of the farmer, and Mending Wall is one of the particular thing which affects the life of the farmers every year. And on the other hand, if we think about on mythological way, it is a tradition followed in New England uh, by the farmers. The ceremony of the particular mending wall, the clearance or the how the wall is damaged, and how it is particularly put it again on the place by the farmers. Both the farmer and his neighbor, tried to clear that road, clear that particular wall in uh, particular season, spring season, and how the poem reflects the tradition of the farmers, the particular rituals of the farmers, and mending wall is a part and parcel of their life, and they never think about why should we put it again as it is, and it is every year activity. So here we can understand it is a poem written by Robert Frost for the uh, relationship between both neighbors, farmers, and neighbors. So, in the next part, we will learn about the uh, what is the theme of the mending wall. Till then, thank you.